You have already lived through things that should have folded your spirit like paper in a storm, and yet here you are, still breathing, still seeking, still listening for God in the middle of the noise, which means something deeper is true about your life than what fear has been trying to tell you. There were nights when your heart felt too tired to pray, mornings when you woke up carrying a weight you could not explain, seasons when confusion wrapped itself around your mind, and silent battles drained your strength without leaving visible bruises. But even then, something kept you from completely collapsing. That something was not luck. That was not chance. That was not your imagination struggling to stay positive. That was the hand of God preserving you when you did not even have the language to ask for preservation. And that is why this message matters right now. Because if God has carried you through every shadow, every betrayal, every delay, every private heartbreak, every spiritual attack, every moment when you thought this might finally be the thing that takes you out, then He is not about to abandon you at this point in the journey. You are not standing at the edge of destruction as much as you are standing at the edge of revelation. And what feels fragile in your life right now may actually be the very thing being held together most tightly by God's unseen power. So, before we go any deeper, take this moment as a divine pause and let your soul breathe. If this message is speaking to you, subscribe, like this video, and comment, "God brought me this far." Because sometimes your own written words become a line in the sand, a testimony against fear, and a reminder to your spirit that heaven has not forgotten your name. And as you stay with this message, let yourself receive the truth that your survival was never random, because you survived what was meant to break you. And that alone should tell you that your story has never been ordinary. There were people who smiled in your face and doubted you in secret, doors that shut without explanation, prayers that seemed to echo back in silence, and delays that made you wonder whether you had somehow missed the timing of your life. But none of it erased the fact that you are still here. There were moments that felt final, moments that carried the taste of ending, moments when the rejection was so sharp that it made you question your worth, moments when betrayal made you cautious with your own heart, moments when spiritual warfare clouded your mind and made peace feel far away. And still, somehow, the thread of your life did not snap. This is where many chosen ones misunderstand their own testimony, because they keep looking at what wounded them and forgetting to study what failed to destroy them. Not everything you survived was meant to teach you by comfort. Some things revealed your calling by resistance. The pressure around your life has often been a clue to the value within it. Ordinary people do not always trigger extraordinary opposition, but when heaven has marked a life, friction follows. That does not mean God has left that life undefended. It means hell noticed what heaven already knew. And the fact that you made it through experiences that should have buried your confidence, erased your joy, and shattered your ability to trust is evidence that you have been covered in ways you still do not fully understand. There were traps that closed too late, people who lost interest right before they could do greater damage, plans that fell apart before you could walk into disaster, instincts that told you not to go, not to answer, not to sign, not to trust. And you may have called it coincidence, but heaven calls it covering. Your journey is proof that you are not ordinary, because ordinary survival does not explain the number of times you should have been completely emotionally bankrupt and yet were given just enough strength for one more step. Heaven kept you alive for a reason. Heaven kept your mind from breaking for a reason. Heaven kept your heart soft when it had every excuse to harden for a reason. There is purpose in the fact that your flame did not go out, even when the wind became cruel. And once you begin to see your life through that lens, you stop asking only, "Why was I attacked?" and start asking the holier question, "What has God been protecting in me all this time?" That question changes everything, because it leads you into the truth that God did not bring you this far to abandon you. God is not careless with human lives, and He is not casual with a calling. People may start things they never intend to finish. People may promise what they cannot sustain. People may guide you halfway, and disappear when your process becomes inconvenient. But God is not like people. His consistency is one of the quiet miracles holding your life together right now. He does not author a story just to lose interest in the middle chapters. He does not lead a soul out of darkness simply to drop it in a deeper pit. He does not awaken a spirit, sharpen discernment, expose hidden truths, strip away false attachments, and walk you through refining fire, only to leave you stranded in the place between promise and fulfillment. If He brought you here, then here is not proof of abandonment. Here is proof of ongoing design. You may not understand the map, but you are still on it, and that matters, because uncertainty can be loud. It can make an unfinished season feel like a forgotten one. It can make waiting feel like punishment. It can make a hidden process feel like divine distance. But what feels uncertain to you is not out of God's control. His silence is not absence. His delay is not disorder. His pace is not panic. God sees the whole architecture of what He is building, while you are often only looking at one unfinished wall and wondering why it does not yet resemble home. There is still purpose ahead of you, not because life suddenly became easy, but because God does not waste preservation. If He kept you through what should have erased you, then He intends for that survival to serve something greater than mere endurance. There is a reason you had to learn discernment. There is a reason you had to outgrow environments that once felt familiar. There is a reason your appetite changed, your circle changed, your tolerance for shallow things changed. God has been preparing your inner world for a future your outer world has not fully revealed yet. That is why you must not interpret your present discomfort as proof that you are lost. Sometimes it is proof that you are being repositioned. Sometimes the ground feels strange because you are standing in a new spiritual landscape. Sometimes the old support systems disappear because God is removing whatever would have tempted you to trust substitutes instead of Him. And that brings you into the weariness you feel, because it is real and it should not be mocked, minimized, or covered with hollow slogans. You are tired in places that sleep does not fix. You are carrying emotional heaviness that does not always have a neat explanation. You have had moments when giving up looked peaceful, not because you wanted destruction, but because you wanted relief. You have known what it is to smile while your spirit felt thin, to keep functioning while privately wondering how much longer you can sustain this pace, and to continue showing faith while your insides felt like a dim room after the candles burned low. But being tired does not mean you are losing. Weariness is not the same thing as failure. Exhaustion is not proof of defeat. Even strong chosen ones reach seasons where they can barely hold on, where their prayers become shorter, where their emotions become harder to organize, where their only achievement some days is simply not quitting. Those seasons do not cancel their strength. They reveal what kind of strength was actually carrying them, because some strength is loud and dramatic, but the holiest strength is often quiet. It is the strength that gets up again without applause, the strength that chooses not to curse life even while confused by it, the strength that stays tender in a hard season, the strength that continues to believe in God even when His methods feel mysterious, the strength that whispers, "I do not understand this, but I will not let go," and keeps walking. That is not weakness pretending to be brave. That is mature faith learning to breathe under pressure. And one of the deepest truths you can learn in this hour is that your weakness may be the very place where God's strength becomes most visible. The world teaches people to honor power that looks polished, but God often reveals Himself most clearly in the places where human self-sufficiency runs out. When you no longer have the energy to perform strength, you begin to encounter sustaining grace. When you no longer have the illusion that you can fix everything, you become more open to divine intervention. When your own resources feel too small, the size of God becomes easier to see. So do not despise the season where you feel stretched thin. It may be the very season teaching you the difference between control and trust, between striving and surrender, between looking stable and actually being held. And once you understand that, you can begin to see that God is holding you in the invisible battle even now. What you cannot see is just as real as what you can feel. The unseen realm is not fiction for the spiritually dramatic. It is the hidden layer of reality where assignments clash, where prayers move, where resistance forms, where protection is released, and where outcomes are shaped long before they appear in the visible world. You have spent time grieving what did happen, without realizing how much you should also thank God for what never reached you. There are attacks that were blocked before they arrived. There are disasters that were delayed until they dissolved. There are betrayals that were exposed early enough to limit the damage. There are invitations that looked promising, but would have led you into unnecessary sorrow. There are environments you wanted access to that would have drained your oil. There are people you thought you lost who are actually removed as an act of mercy. And there are prayers you thought went unanswered that were being answered through protection rather than promotion. Not every blessing looks like increase. Some blessings look like interruption. Some answers from God come wrapped in a closed door, a changed schedule, a restless feeling, a sudden delay, a divine no that bruises your expectations but saves your future. Heaven has been defending you in ways you never noticed. While you were grieving what was withheld, God may have been restraining what would have crushed you. While you were asking why things were not moving faster, He may have been dismantling traps beneath the surface. While you were feeling overlooked, He may have been shielding you from visibility you were not yet meant to carry. This is why spiritual maturity requires more than asking God for open doors. It requires trust that His protection is wise, even when it is invisible. It requires humility to admit that you do not always know which outcome is safest for your calling. And it requires patience to believe that heaven sees farther than your present emotions. Some of the greatest miracles in your life will never become public testimonies because they are miracles of prevention. You will never know every accident you missed, every scheme that failed, every emotional collapse that was softened, every dark thought that lost strength before it could become action, every wrong connection that unraveled before it could become a chain around your destiny. But not knowing does not make those rescues less real. It just means God has been working in hidden ways, faithful ways, quiet ways, warrior ways. So tonight, if your soul feels fragile, if your future feels hazy, if your heart feels tired from carrying what no one else fully sees, let this truth settle over you like a shield in the dark. You are not being held together by your own strength alone. You are being sustained by a God who has watched every tear, counted every night, measured every burden, and stayed closer than your fear ever admitted. You made it this far because He would not let you be taken out, and you will keep moving forward because He still has His hand on your life. What looks fragile is not forsaken. What feels delayed is not denied. What feels heavy is not hopeless. And what feels like the edge may actually be the place where heaven is about to show you how much of your life has been carried all along. And what makes this season even more sacred is that it is teaching you to trust differently. Because there are times when God allows visible supports to be removed, not to shame you, not to leave you exposed, but to retrain the way your soul leans. There were seasons when you had clearer signs, quicker confirmations, stronger emotional certainty, and people around you who seemed to reinforce what you hoped God was doing. But now you may be walking through a stretch where the external scaffolding has thinned out, where the answers are not arriving on demand, where reassurance does not come in the old forms, and where you are being asked to keep moving with less sensory evidence than before. That can feel cruel to the flesh, because the human heart likes handles, maps, guarantees, familiar rhythms, and visible proof that everything will turn out well. Yet God often grows His deepest work in the soil of holy uncertainty. When visible supports are removed, your reflexes get exposed. You find out what you run to first, what you cling to when the ground shakes, what voice you trust when your own thoughts become noisy, and whether your peace was resting in God Himself or in the predictable patterns around Him. This is why the season hurts in a different way. It is not just that you want an answer. It is that you want the comfort of knowing where everything is going. You want to understand why this person left, why that opportunity stalled, why the timing shifted, why the door did not open when you fasted and believed it would, why the burden increased before the breakthrough appeared. But in the ache of not having clear answers, something else is happening beneath the surface. The conversation between you and God is becoming less transactional and more intimate. You are learning how to stay with Him even when He has not explained Himself. You are discovering what it means to seek his heart instead of only his instructions. You are finding a deeper kind of nearness, the kind that is not dependent on emotional fireworks, not dependent on immediate outcomes, not dependent on constant reassurance, but rooted in the quiet conviction that he is still God when the room feels silent. That kind of intimacy is expensive because it costs certainty, but what it gives in return is sturdier than certainty ever was. It gives you stronger faith, because faith that has never been stretched is usually just preference wearing religious language. It gives you sharper discernment, because when external noise falls away, you begin to notice subtle checks in your spirit, tiny redirections, inner warnings, quiet peace where logic said panic should be, and you begin to understand that God does not always shout. Sometimes he leads like a lamp instead of lightning. It gives you deeper surrender, because surrender is not proven when everything is easy to accept. Surrender is proven when you do not like the pace, do not understand the method, do not feel emotionally fortified, and still decide that God's wisdom outranks your fear. Trust is not being built in you through comfort alone. It is being forged through dependence. It is being shaped in the places where your own ability runs thin and you have to lean on what cannot be seen with natural eyes. That kind of trust does not look glamorous, but it is the kind that survives storms, because it is no longer leaning on outcomes, it is leaning on God. And once you begin to see that, you can look back at what felt like delay and recognize that much of it was actually divine mercy. There are things you once begged for that would have bruised you in ways you were not yet mature enough to name. There are doors you cried over that were never meant to be your assignment. There are timelines you tried to force that would have attached you to unready people, unstable environments, and blessings arriving before your inner world had the strength to carry them. Delay has a painful sound when you first hear it. It sounds like denial, like silence, like being forgotten, like being left behind while others move forward and post their victories where you can see them. But heaven's perspective is different. God does not only protect you by saying no, he also protects you by saying not yet. That not yet can feel like deprivation while you are inside it, but later it often reveals itself as mercy in disguise. Some things had to be postponed because the timing was not right. The version of you who wanted them was sincere, but not yet prepared. Some things had to be postponed because the people connected to them were still carrying confusion, compromise, or instability that would have spilled onto your life. Some things had to be postponed because the environment around you was not healthy enough to hold what God intends to build in a lasting way. A seed placed in the wrong season is not cursed, it is simply vulnerable. God knows the climate required for your calling. He knows when a door will develop you and when it will deform you. He knows when visibility will refine you and when it will inflate pressure before your roots are deep enough. His not yet is often one of the tenderest forms of love, though it rarely feels tender in the moment. Love is not always immediate permission. Sometimes love is strategic restraint. Sometimes love blocks what your emotions are rushing toward. Sometimes love keeps you in a hidden season until the wrong appetite loses its grip on you and the right foundation has fully formed beneath you. That means disappointment, while real, is not always proof that something has gone wrong. It may be proof that God is unwilling to let you settle for a version of life that would have looked promising, but cost you peace. And if you can begin to see past the disappointment, you may discover divine wisdom where you once only saw delay. You may realize that a closed door saved you from carrying someone else's chaos. You may realize that silence protected you from premature decisions. You may realize that the opportunity that vanished was not stolen from you, but sifted away for your good. This does not make the waiting easy, but it does make it meaningful. And meaning is what starts to shift the atmosphere from pain to promise. Because the truth is, you are closer to stability than you realize. It may not feel that way if you have spent recent months feeling as though you were one bad conversation, one more disappointment, one more financial strain, one more emotional hit away from finally breaking. But even this season of almost falling has also been a season of being strengthened. Strengthening does not always feel strong while it is happening. Roots do not applaud while they deepen. Bones do not announce themselves while they knit. Foundations do not look impressive while they are being poured underground. But what God has been doing in you has been quieter and stronger than your emotions have been able to measure. He has been establishing your footing, teaching you how not to be ruled by immediate reactions, training your spirit to recognize what is temporary and what is eternal, and maturing you in ways that will create peace that lasts longer than a passing mood. A younger version of you may have wanted instant rescue. This version is being prepared for lasting stability. That means your appetite is changing, your standards are changing, your ability to sit with discomfort without collapsing is changing, your dependence on spectacle is changing. God is not just trying to make you feel better for one night. He is building something in you that can carry peace in broad daylight, in hard conversations, in delayed seasons, in silent stretches, in moments when life does not immediately explain itself. That is why hope is appropriate here. Not shallow hope, not glitter poured over pain, but grounded hope, the kind that stands up inside the chest and says, something real has been happening even when I could not name it. Relief may be nearer than you think. Clarity may be nearer than you think. Restoration may be nearer than you think. Not because everything is suddenly effortless, but because God rarely lets strengthening happen without eventually revealing why it was necessary. The season of trembling is often followed by a season of steadiness, not because the world has become less chaotic, but because the soul has learned where to stand. And the more that steadiness forms in you, the more clearly you can see that the enemy wanted panic, but God is building peace. Panic has a certain signature. It rushes, it exaggerates, it pulls tomorrow's shadows into today's mind. It makes unfinished stories sound like final verdicts. It takes a temporary silence and turns it into a lifetime sentence. It takes one closed door and tries to convince you every door is closing. It takes tiredness and renames it failure. It takes uncertainty and paints it as abandonment. Panic is not merely an emotion. It is often a strategy, an attempt to cloud discernment, fracture attention, and push you into premature conclusions. But God keeps calling you back into stillness. Not because stillness is passive, but because stillness is where lies lose volume and truth becomes easier to hear. His presence does not always remove the storm in one moment, but it can quiet the inner weather enough for you to stop calling every wave your future. Peace is not denial. Peace is not pretending pain is not painful. Peace is not decorating worry with spiritual vocabulary. Peace is spiritual authority. It is the refusal to let fear narrate your life more loudly than God does. It is the decision to let truth sit higher than adrenaline. It is the discipline of saying, I will not measure God's faithfulness by the turbulence of this hour. When God builds peace in a person, He is not merely making them calmer. He is making them harder to manipulate. A panicked person is easier to rush, easier to deceive, easier to bait into wrong moves. A peaceful person is slower to surrender their clarity. They do not chase every alarm. They do not build doctrine out of dread. They do not call every feeling a prophecy. And that is part of what God is forming in you now. He is teaching you how to return to stillness when your mind tries to sprint into disaster. He is teaching you how to breathe before reacting, pray before assuming, wait before declaring defeat. That is why you must stop measuring your future by your current emotions. Feelings are real, but they are not always reliable interpreters. You can feel afraid and still be safe. You can feel late and still be on time in heaven's calendar. You can feel weak and still be deeply sustained. You can feel hidden and still be highly protected. You can feel confused and still be guided. Your emotions report weather. They do not determine destiny. And once you let that truth settle into you, it becomes easier to hear the reassurance that God's hand on your life is still active. He has not gone silent in the way fear suggests. He has not become absent, distant, or disinterested. The God who rescued you before has not suddenly lost sight of your address. Think about the moments you should not have survived, and yet did. Think about the prayers that were answered in ways you did not expect. Think about the warnings you somehow sensed in time. Think about the comfort that found you on a day when no human being could have explained why your heart suddenly felt steadier. Think about the doors that opened after long stretches of nothing. Think about the chapters you thought would finish you, yet here you are, able to look back on them as evidence instead of endings. Those were not accidents. Those were fingerprints. They were signs that God's hand was already moving, even when movement looked slow. And that same hand is still moving now. Divine activity is not cancelled just because it is not flashy. Heaven is not inactive simply because the visible world has not yet caught up. Seeds are active under soil. Healing is active under scars. Alignment is active under silence. Some of the holiest movements in your life are happening where your natural senses have no access. That is why you must not insult the hidden season by calling it empty. Your story is still under divine supervision. God is still editing, still arranging, still filtering, still strengthening, still opening, still restraining, still preparing, still carrying. There are things He is not allowing near you. There are burdens He is keeping from fully landing. There are answers He is positioning. There are connections He is clarifying. There are lies He is thinning out. There are old agreements He is breaking. There are rooms He is preparing you to enter without shrinking in fear. Slow movement is still movement when God is the one guiding it. Do not confuse gentleness for absence. Do not confuse hiddenness for inactivity. Do not confuse the unfinished scene for an unfinished God. The hand on your life is active, and because it is active, you will not fall, because God is finishing what He started. This is where the message turns from comfort into declaration. You are not hanging here by luck, by coincidence, or by some fragile accident of timing. You are hanging by promise. And promise is stronger than your panic, stronger than your past, stronger than the voices that tried to interpret your delay as defeat. God completes what He begins. He is not like human beings who leave projects half-built, relationships half-kept, words half-meant. When He starts a work in a life, He remains faithful to it, even when the life itself becomes confused in the middle. He does not discard people because the process got messy. He does not revoke purpose because the path included tears. He does not abandon the chosen because the chosen got tired. He remains. He sustains. He finishes. That means this moment can become a turning point, not because everything external changes overnight, but because fear loses its authority when faith remembers who God is. Fear thrives on amnesia. It wants you to forget every rescue, every answered prayer, every hidden protection, every impossible survival, every time God made a way that logic did not predict. But faith remembers. Faith gathers evidence from your history with God and uses it to steady the present. Faith says, if He kept me then, He can keep me now. If He spoke before, He can speak again. If He closed certain doors to protect me then, He can be trusted in this silence too. If He brought me through wilderness, betrayal, delay, and exhaustion without letting the core of me die, then this chapter is not the chapter where He suddenly changes character. You will not fall because God is still Himself. He is still faithful in the dark, still strategic in silence, still kind in correction, still merciful in delay, still active in hiddenness, still sovereign over what looks unstable. And the more you let that truth rise, the more something inside you begins to stand up again. Not arrogance, not denial, not emotional hype. Something holier, a returning steadiness, a reassembled courage, a quiet authority, a refusal to let dread define the future. You begin to realize that what threatens to undo you has actually been training you to hear God more clearly, trust God more deeply, and stand more firmly than before. You begin to see that survival was never the end goal. Formation was happening too. And now the message closes where your heart most needs it to close, with the reassurance that even if you feel weak, you are not abandoned. Weakness does not disqualify you from being held. Tiredness does not cancel divine protection. Confusion does not mean your name slipped from heaven's memory. God did not carry you through countless battles, private tears, silent warfare, delays, betrayals, and impossible nights, just to let you collapse now. That would contradict the entire pattern of his faithfulness in your life. No, you are still covered, still guarded, still being sustained. There is a shield around your mind that fear cannot fully penetrate. There is a hand beneath your life that failure cannot fully remove. There is an assignment on your story that darkness cannot casually erase. So tonight, let your spirit unclench. Let your breathing slow. Let the noise step back from the center. And if this message has found you in the very place where you needed it, write your faith into the moment and comment, "God brought me this far," or "I will not fall." Not as a performance for other people, but as a witness against every lie that tried to tell you your journey was ending in defeat. Rest tonight knowing this. The God who kept watch over you in every chapter before this one has not stepped away now. He is still watching, still guarding, still carrying, and while you sleep, He will remain the quiet strength around your life.